They say if you're ever in the wilds of Scotland, deep in the forests, far from the roads, and you see a flickering fire that wasn't there before, don't be afraid. Not right away at least. Because it might just be him. They call him SamHain now. A storyteller, a wanderer, a keeper of ancient lore. He's not there to harm you. Not unless you disrespect the land or mock the old ways. But if your heart's good and your ears are open, he'll offer you a seat by his fire and tell you a tale or two to keep your feet warm and your wits sharp. But SamHain wasn't always like this. Once, long ago, there was a boy named Euan. His name meant born of the yew tree. He lived in the 5th century, back when the land was ruled by forests, and the old gods still walked in shadow. He was Pictish, part of the ancient tribes, quiet, kind, and he loved the woods more than he loved people. Euan would vanish for days at a time into the hills, not to hide, but to be. He knew the sound of every bird. He followed the footprints of deer like lines in a poem. He'd speak to the trees like old friends and leave gifts of honey and stone at sacred springs. The forest knew him and the trees loved him, but the world beyond the trees, it wasn't as kind. One winter, a jealous farmer, mean as he was loud, accused Euan of killing his sheep. Said he found the carcasses near a path the boy had often walked. There was no proof, but there was fear. Fear of the woods, fear of the old ways, and sometimes fear is all it takes. They grabbed him as he returned from the hills, arms full of roots and winter herbs. They dragged him before their kin, and they sentenced him to death. Not just any death, a ritual death. They gave him one night in the village granary, cold, dark, and thick with dust. No fire, no food, just the breath of winter squeezing through the slats in the wood. He didn't cry. Instead, Euan pressed his hands to the earthen floor and whispered to the soil. He sang to the stones. He closed his eyes and listened to the rustle of mice in the walls, to the wind shifting through the trees beyond the village fence. And the forest heard him. All through the night, strange things stirred. Owls gathered in silent flocks on the rooftops. Foxes sat in circles at the edge of the clearing. The flames in the hearths sputtered low, casting long, shivering shadows that wouldn't sit still. And one by one, the villagers began to dream. Dreams of ash and antlers, of weeping trees and clawed roots, of something vast and grieving moving through the woods. By morning, none of them would speak of what they saw. But still, they marched him to the clearing, tied and silent, pretending they weren't afraid. There were whispers amongst the villagers that night, quiet ones, behind closed doors and shuttered windows. Some said the sheep hadn't been torn but withered, like something old had breathed in them. Others remembered the way the wind had stilled when Euan passed, how birds would gather on rooftops to watch him walk the village path. A few even recalled how their children had returned from the woods, speaking in riddles, claiming they'd heard the trees calling his name. But no one spoke up, not out loud, not when it counted. An old woman, May, left a bundle of herbs by the granary door. "For your journey," she whispered. She didn't stay to see if he found them. A young man named Corin, who had once followed Euan into the woods as a boy, stood at the edge of the square the next morning and watched as the effigy was built. His fists were clenched, his mouth shut. They told themselves it was justice, or tradition, or safety. But deep down, in the marrow of their bones, they all knew they were feeding their fear to the fire. They built a wicker man, a giant of woven branches, painted a sackcloth with mocking Pictish symbols, shoved it over his head and stuffed him inside the effigy like dry kindling. It was Samhain, the end of summer and the beginning of winter, the last night of the harvest, a night for celebration, when it is said the veil between the spirit realm and ours is at its thinnest, the longest night of the year. They lit the fire, they laughed, they drank, they danced while he screamed. But you see, the forest was watching. There's an old spirit that lives in the hidden places, beneath moss and root and shadow. He's called the Gilly-Doo, the silent guardian. And he loved Euan like a son. As the flames roared, the Gilly-Doo came. He stepped from the trees, wrapped in leaves and mist. He tore through the burning effigy and pulled Euan from the fire, cradling him in arms of bark and green. But Euan was changed. The sack had melted into his flesh. No healing magic, not even from the forest itself, could take it off. So instead, the Gilly-Doo took away the pain, and he gave the boy a new name, so that events of this night would never be forgotten. SamHain. "You shall walk between the worlds now," the Gilly-Doo said. "You will not grow old, nor stay in one place. Your voice will carry the weight of the old ways. You will tell tales, not just for entertainment, but as warnings, to remind the world of things they've forgotten, and the things that still walk in the dark." And so he does. To this day, SamHain walks the wilds of Scotland. He finds the weary travellers, the respectful campers, the hikers who still listen to the wind. He invites them to sit by his fire and tell stories. Some are just spooky, but others are true. So if you're out in the woods, some cold night, and you venture upon a quiet figure sitting by a fire, face hidden behind a weathered sackcloth mask, voice like wind through pine, don't run, just listen. Because you're not just hearing a story, you're hearing the voice of the forest itself. And the forest never forgets.